He fired me. Right there, in the middle of a packed cafe, with the clatter of forks and the murmur of 100 conversations as my audience, my manager pointed a finger in my face and told me I was done. And my crime? My terrible, unforgivable crime? I paid for an old veteran's meal out of my own pocket from my own tips. I saw a man who looked lost and hungry, a man who had served this country, and I showed him a small kindness. That's what got me fired. But what that manager, Clayton, didn't know, what no one in that room could have ever predicted, was who was about to walk through that door, and why the entire room would fall into a silence so heavy you could feel it in your bones. That day, like so many others, started with a storm. Not a storm of rain and thunder, but the lunch rush at Riverside Café. It always hit at 11 a.m. sharp. Riverside is this modest little corner joint in Eugene, Oregon, tucked between a pharmacy that always smelled of disinfectant and a laundromat that puffed out warm, soapy air. It was a place of regulars, of routines, but at lunchtime, it transformed into a whirlwind of chaos. I was Tasha Melrose, 29 years old, and that day I was running on fumes. I'd been working double shifts all week, trying to scrape enough together to fix the transmission on my beat-up Civic. My sneakers were still soaked from the morning rain, that squelching, uncomfortable feeling with every step. My apron, which was supposed to be a crisp blue, had a damp, dark patch from an accidental iced tea spill earlier. A high school kid had bumped my arm, and a whole gallon of sweet tea went flying. It was an accident, but you know who didn't see it that way? Clayton. Clayton Renshaw was the manager. He was one of those people who seemed to be born irritated, like life had handed him a rule book at birth, and he was personally offended every time someone else broke a rule, even a tiny one. He stood behind the counter, arms folded, eyes sharp, his hair gelled back in a way that screamed 1980s game show host. He never yelled. He didn't need to. The way he spoke, slow and smug and dripping with condescension, was more effective than any shout. It told you that you were replaceable, that any kindness shown was temporary, a privilege he could revoke at any moment. But it paid the bills. Mostly. So there I was, juggling a dozen things at once. Coffee mugs clinked louder, the receipt printer was spitting out orders faster than I could read them, and the line at the register was sneaking towards the door, full of impatient faces. Table 6 was asking about their missing fries for the third time. A to-go order was sitting on the pass, waiting to be boxed, and the customer was tapping his foot with the patience of a ticking bomb. And under booth 3, 2 toddlers were screaming like they were auditioning for a horror movie. In the middle of all this, my coworker, Lily, looked like she was about to have a full-blown meltdown. She was a high school senior, a sweet kid, but the lunch rush was eating her alive. She was already 2 orders behind. Her hands were shaking, and her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. I caught her eye as I rushed past. "You got this, girl," I whispered, trying to put a confidence I didn't feel into my voice. "Don't let them see you sweat." She gave me a watery, grateful smile. Behind the counter, Clayton barked, his voice cutting through the sizzle of the fryer. "Melrose. Table 12 is still waiting on their check." "I sent it 10 minutes ago," I replied, not even turning around as I refilled a coffee mug. He scoffed, loud enough for half the cafe to hear. "Then walk it over yourself. Don't just send things." I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted blood. I'd worked under Clayton long enough to know better than to respond. Arguing with him was like trying to teach a cat to do algebra. Pointless, and you just end up getting scratched. It was as I was heading toward the kitchen to chase down those missing fries for table 6 that I noticed him. He was standing awkwardly near the door, an old man, thin as a scarecrow. His clothes were damp and worn through at the elbows. His white hair was matted, his eyes cloudy and unfocused, and one of his boots was untied. He just looked lost. No one else seemed to notice him. The customers were too busy scrolling through their phones, sipping their drinks, or arguing over receipts. Clayton was too busy micromanaging. But I saw him, and my heart just ached. I put the order slip for the fries in the kitchen window. Then I stepped toward him. "Sir?" I asked gently. "Are you okay?" He blinked twice, looking past me, through me, like he was trying to focus on a memory just out of reach. Then he slowly turned his head, his eyes finally landing on me. "Am I? I was supposed to meet someone here. I think." His voice was a hoarse, barely there whisper. It was then that I saw it. Tucked under his coat, a faded, tarnished dog tag hung around his neck. And on his jacket, I caught sight of a patch. It was military. Old. Maybe Korean War era. Maybe Vietnam. My grandfather had served. I recognized the look of a man who had seen things that never quite leave you. "You hungry?" I asked. A small, hesitant smile touched his lips, or at least he tried to smile. I could eat something warm. I knew the cafe had a rule. A big, ugly sign Clayton had posted in the break room, written in his own sharp, angry handwriting. "We're a business, not a shelter. No handouts. No freebies." It was a rule he enforced with a cruel sort of glee. But looking at this man, at the quiet dignity he still held despite his confusion and his worn-out clothes, that rule didn't matter. Not to me. Not right now. I guided him to an empty booth and helped him sit. His hands were trembling slightly. I went to the lost and found box we kept in the back and pulled out a soft, woolen blanket someone had left behind months ago. I draped it over his shoulders. Then I walked straight back into the kitchen. I slid a $10 bill from my own tip jar into the register and called out to Louise, the cook. Louise was a tough woman who'd seen it all, but she had a good heart. "Louise, get me a plate," I said. "Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, extra gravy." Louise gave me a long look, but she didn't say a word. She'd worked with me long enough to know that if I was doing something like this, it was for a reason. I brought the steaming plate over myself, along with a glass of warm water and some cornbread. The man stared at the plate for a second. Then he looked up at me like I'd just handed him a plate of solid gold. "Thank you," he whispered. "You didn't have to." I smiled, a real smile, for the first time all day. "Yeah," I said. "I did." But just as I turned to check on my other tables, my moment of small satisfaction shattered. Clayton stepped out from behind the counter. He had seen the whole thing. And from the way his face tightened, the way his jaw clenched, I knew exactly what was coming next. But I didn't know he'd do it in front of everyone. "You mind telling me what the hell that was?" Clayton's voice cut through the clatter of plates like a knife. The cafe hadn't gone quiet yet, but nearby tables were starting to listen in. A mother pushing a stroller paused. The guy at the corner booth took out one earbud. He was cold and confused. "Clayton," I said, keeping my tone even, professional. He didn't order anything, and I didn't ask him to. "I paid for the meal from my tips." "Doesn't matter." Clayton snapped. "That's not how we run things here. You want to feed the whole damn street, too? You working for charity now." My cheeks were burning, but it wasn't with shame. It was with a hot, sharp anger. "He's a veteran," I said, my voice rising despite myself. He looked hungry. I did what any decent person would have done. Clayton stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound dangerous. "You don't decide who gets free food. You don't run this place. I do. And when you break rules, there are consequences." "Then take it out of my paycheck," I challenged him. "Dock me, write me up, whatever you want. But don't make this into a scene." Clayton turned, his eyes scanning the room, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Then, he intentionally, loudly, called out, "Attention, folks. This employee just handed out a free meal on our dime. Just so we're clear, if anyone else needs a handout, this is the new policy. Just ask Tasha, she'll foot the bill." The cafe went dead quiet. Utensils paused midair. Someone at the front laughed, an awkward, nervous sound that quickly died. My heart sank. My fists clenched at my sides. But I didn't say a word. The veteran, still sitting at the booth, looked up, like he didn't quite understand what was happening. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. "Sir, please eat your food and stay out of staff business." Clayton waved him off like a nuisance. But the man didn't sit back down. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something that shimmered faintly. It was an old silver badge, worn but recognizable. A purple heart pin, bent at the edges, but unmistakable. "I served in Kisan," he said quietly. "Most of my unit didn't make it. My boys, they'd never let this stand." Clayton raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." She showed me more respect than half this country has in decades. "You fired her for doing what's right." The veteran's voice, though frail, carried a weight of authority that silenced Clayton for a moment. I stepped forward, my voice firm now. "Please, sir, you don't owe me anything. Just finish your meal, okay?" The veteran looked at me, then back at Clayton. He placed the pin on the edge of the table and whispered, almost to himself, "They'll know. I'm not alone." It sounded odd, like he was talking to ghosts. I figured maybe he was just confused, lost in memory. I untied my apron and folded it carefully. I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not for him. Louise stepped out from the kitchen. "This isn't right," he muttered. "You want to go too?" Clayton shot him a look. Louise looked at me and shrugged. "Just saying, Dot." He walked past the veteran on his way out and gently placed his hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. "It's really okay." But his eyes, misty and unfocused, locked onto mine. "They'll come," he said again, softly. "They always come." I didn't know what that meant. Outside, the rain had picked up again. I sat at the edge of the bus bench, my apron still folded neatly in my lap, like it meant something. My hands shook, but not from cold. I wasn't mad that I got fired. What stung was the way it happened. Like my kindness was a problem that needed to be stamped out in public. I stared at the puddle in front of me, watching cars roll by without looking up. I'd expected at least one person to speak up. Louise, maybe? Lily. But nothing. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my older sister. "Still good for dinner Sunday?" I didn't answer. Back inside the cafe, things were unraveling quickly. Clayton tried to hold the room together. "Okay, everybody," he said with an artificial grin. "Let's get back to your meals. Show's over. We're not turning this place into a circus." But it was already too late. People had seen what they saw, and they weren't about to forget it. A woman sitting by the window stood up slowly. Her name was Jean Harlow, a retired nurse who came to Riverside every Thursday after her physical therapy. She walked with a cane and a purpose. "I was in nursing school during the Gulf War," she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My brother came home in a flag-covered box. That old man in the booth, he could have been him. And that waitress, she acted better than you ever will, son." Clayton looked like someone had slapped him. Another customer, an Uber driver named Reggie Mathers who came in every weekday morning, spoke next. "I've been coming here since it opened. Never had a problem with anyone except you. You don't lead people by belittling them. You lead by example." Tasha was the example. Someone clapped. Then someone else. It wasn't a standing ovation, it was quiet, awkward, but real. Clayton was losing his grip, fast. "This is my place. I decide what goes and what doesn't," he shouted. One of the Marines who had just walked in stepped toward him. "Sir," he said, his voice soft but firm, "no one's questioning your right to run your business. We're questioning the way you did it. You could have pulled her aside. You could have asked a question. Instead, you humiliated her." Clayton threw up his hands. "She gave away product. That costs money. How much did the plate cost you?" Jean asked. $10? $12. No answer. "How much do you think this will cost you when that video hits Facebook?" She pointed to the customer who had her phone out the entire time, the one pretending to sip her latte while clearly recording everything. Clayton glanced at her. His jaw moved like he wanted to speak, but didn't. Louise came back out from the kitchen, wiping his hands with a towel. "You've been writing us for years, like we're lucky to be here," he said. "Tasha never treated any of us that way." She stayed late, showed up early, never complained. She bought Lily lunch her first week here and didn't say a word about it. Lily's voice cracked when she spoke. She helped me get my brakes fixed. Paid half. I didn't even ask. There it was. The weight of the room had shifted completely. Clayton stood in a space that used to be his, but no longer belonged to him. He scanned the room, eyes narrowed. All of you think you're heroes now, huh? You think she's some kind of saint. No one answered. In the booth, the veteran gently folded his napkin and placed it on the plate. He reached for the purple heart pin, but one of the Marines stopped him. Leave it, he said softly. It belongs here now. The old man nodded once. Tell her, thank you, he whispered. Tell her my boys never forget. Then he stood, slower than most, but still with dignity, and followed the Marines out. As the door closed behind them, the entire cafe felt different. Heavier somehow. Clayton stared at the napkin on the plate, then the pin. He said nothing, but outside, someone else was already waiting. Someone who didn't come to eat. It wasn't flashy. No sirens, no flag stickers or bumper slogans. Just a black Chevy Suburban rolling to a quiet stop outside the cafe. The rain had faded to a mist by now, barely clinging to the windshield. It idled for a moment before the driver's door clicked open. I was still sitting on the bench and looked up out of reflex. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but there was something different about how it moved. Smooth, deliberate, like it belonged to someone who didn't waste time. The doors opened, one after another. 4 men stepped out. Not young, not fresh-faced. These weren't recruits. These were Marines who'd been through things and come out the other side with a calm most people didn't understand. 2 were black, 1 Latino, 1 white. Their uniforms were clean but lived in. Their boots were regulation, but broken in. The one who stepped forward first had sergeant stripes and the kind of expression that made people straighten up without being told to. I noticed how passers-by slowed down to look, but didn't stop. You could tell these men weren't here for coffee. They scanned the cafe windows without saying a word. The sergeant, Reuben Cole, according to the nameplate stitched into his chest, opened the door and walked in. The others followed. The bell rang just the same, but the moment they stepped inside, the energy shifted like someone had unplugged the room. Reggie, still sitting at the corner table, whispered, "Those ain't tourists." Behind the counter, Clayton froze mid-step. The paper in his hand hung limp. His eyes bounced from one uniform to the next. Sergeant Cole looked around, then spotted the empty booth, the one where the veteran had just been sitting, the half-eaten meal, the purple heart still resting gently on the napkin. He walked over to the booth, stood there in silence for 3, maybe 4 seconds, then turned to the room. "Who fired the woman who gave him this plate?" he asked. No one answered. Cole didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He turned again, this time toward the counter. "You?" he asked, locking eyes with Clayton. Clayton swallowed. "Look, I don't know what this is about, but..." "Yes, you do," Cole interrupted. "You know exactly what this is about." The tallest of the Marines, a man with sharp eyes and a scar that curved under his chin, stepped closer. His name is Walter Haggerty. He served with our unit's grandfather in Vietnam. The man who taught us what it meant to be brothers. Cole added, "Walter doesn't say much, but when he does, we listen." So when he called one of our guys, said he'd been helped by someone who showed more loyalty than he's seen in years, and then got fired for it, yeah, we made time. Clayton laughed nervously. "This is getting blown way out of proportion. She broke policy. She gave away food without permission." The Marine with the scar folded his arms. "You know how many policies get broken when someone's life is on the line? When a decision has to be made in real time. We were taught to lead by example." "Sounds like she was too." Another Marine, stockier, softer spoken, pointed to the purple heart. "You see that pin? That doesn't belong on your table. It belongs to people who understand sacrifice. Clearly, that ain't you." The customers remained silent. Some pulled out phones, some just watched. I, from the bench outside, couldn't see exactly what was going on, but when I noticed the veterans inside, I stood up instinctively. I didn't recognize any of them, but something told me I was involved in this, whether I liked it or not. I stepped closer to the window and saw the booth empty, except for the plate and the pin. My breath caught in my throat. Back inside, Clayton tried one last time to wrest control back. I'm not here to be lectured. This is my business. You don't like it, don't eat here. Cole nodded once. Fair. But just know we don't forget either. And we don't stay quiet when someone disrespects one of our own, or someone who protects them. The Marine with the scar leaned in, just enough for Clayton to hear him clearly. You fired the wrong one. But they weren't the only ones who showed up that day. Word was already spreading, and the next voices were even closer to home. I didn't want to go back in. I stood at the window like a ghost outside my own story, watching a scene I couldn't believe was happening. For Marines, in full uniform, standing in my old workplace, holding the room in a kind of stillness even Clayton couldn't control. I stepped back, unsure what to do. Then the cafe door swung open. It wasn't a customer or a Marine. It was Lily, clutching her apron, cheeks red from crying. Tasha, she said, rushing up. You need to come back inside, please. I'm not trying to make it worse. You didn't make it worse, I replied. You did the only thing that made any of this make sense, Lily said. She grabbed my wrist gently. Please. Inside, things weren't cooling down. Clayton stood behind the register, arms crossed, face hard, but his eyes darted like someone who knew he was losing ground. The Marines hadn't moved. They didn't have to. When I walked in, a few people actually clapped. Not the loud, over-the-top kind, just soft, quiet, respectful. Like people who knew what I had done was simple and rare. Clayton's voice cracked slightly. I thought I made it clear you no longer work here. I'm not here for the job, I replied. I'm here because a man who served this country deserved a warm meal, and because I'm tired of acting like kindness needs permission. Sergeant Cole turned to me, respectful. Miss Melrose, we're sorry you were treated this way. It shouldn't have gone down like that. I gave a small nod. Thank you. One of the Marines, the tall one with the scar, looked around the room. You all watched this happen. Some of you filmed it. Some just stared. But someone needs to say this out loud. You don't punish people for being decent. Clayton barked a bitter laugh. Oh, come on. She didn't cure cancer. She handed out a plate of meatloaf. She handed out dignity, Cole replied calmly. That counts for something in our book. A woman near the front counter, Cheryl Miles, who ran a hair salon 2 doors down, stood up and crossed her arms. I've seen how you treat your staff, Clayton. The passive-aggressive notes, the way you threatened to cut hours. You didn't fire her because she gave away a plate. You fired her because she reminded people that you don't care. That's not true, Clayton muttered. Reggie, still sipping his now cold coffee, spoke up again. Man, I've been sitting in that corner every morning for 2 years. You've never once said good morning. You walk around like everyone owes you something. Well, guess what? You're the one who lost something today. Clayton stepped out from behind the counter, hands on his hips. You all want to make me the villain here? Go ahead. But none of you pay the bills around here. Louise, standing by the kitchen window, finally said, we keep the lights on. We clean up. We take your crap and smile through it. And the one person who actually made this place feel human, you fired her. Clayton raised his voice. This is mutiny. No, Cole said. This is accountability. Just then, the bell over the door rang again. A man in his early 50s walked in. Military haircut, navy jacket. A local contractor who often worked with veterans. Charles Fenner, he said. I heard what happened. Didn't take long for the story to hit the group chat. Tasha, if you're not already hired somewhere else, I'd be proud to offer you a job at our center. Better pay, better hours, and a place where people actually respect the ones who make it all work. I blinked. I hadn't expected that. Not here. Not this fast. Why would you do that? I asked. Charles smiled. Because Walter Haggerty isn't just a veteran. He's my uncle. And I trust him more than I trust most people walking this earth. Clayton looked stunned. Cheryl looked around. Well, looks like you just lost your best employee and half your regulars. Hope the math works out, Clayton. The Purple Heart still sat on the table, a quiet, shining reminder of what had started all this. But it wasn't the only thing that would leave a mark, because the rest of the town was already talking, and some things can't be swept under a rug. By the time Charles Fenner finished speaking, the cafe wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It had become a kind of courtroom. Every word carried weight. Every silence said something. Clayton's face had gone from smug to stiff, and now to something closer to pale. He glanced around for support, but even the dishwasher, barely old enough to drive, had come out from the back and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His name was Omar Benford, 17, quiet, usually kept his earbuds in and his head down. But not today. He cleared his throat. Can I say something? Clayton raised an eyebrow. Unless it's to go wash dishes. But Omar didn't flinch. I was in the back when she gave him that meal. I heard the whole thing. She pulled $10 from her own tips. She told Louise to ring it in. She didn't sneak anything. Clayton opened his mouth, but Omar didn't stop. And you know what else? She's the only one who ever asks if I need a ride home. I live 2 buses and a long walk away. No one else here even knows that. The room was dead still. She got fired for doing something my mom would have done, Omar said, looking down for a second. And if she's not good enough to work here, then I'm probably not either. You quitting? Clayton snapped. Omar gave a one-shoulder shrug. I don't know yet, but I know I'm not scared of you. From the booth near the front, a man who hadn't said much all day finally stood. He was a trucker, Lenny Duval. Salt and pepper beard, weathered hands. He pulled out his wallet and dropped a 20 on the counter. For the veteran's lunch, he said. And for the waitress who should still be here. Then he walked out. That started something. One by one, customers began doing the same. Standing, grabbing their jackets, leaving bills on tables, nodding to me as they passed, like I was someone they knew, even if they didn't. By the time the 6th person left, Clayton's voice had turned gravelly. This is ridiculous. No, Lily said softly. This is what happens when people stop being afraid of you. Luis finally walked all the way out from behind the kitchen window, wiped his hands on a rag, and placed his chef's knife down on the counter with quiet finality. I'm out, he said. I've worked in 6 kitchens. Never had to look a good person in the eye while they got tossed for being human. Clayton tried one more time to speak like he had authority. You people think I'm the enemy? I built this place. I put in the hours. Then it's too bad you forgot who helped you keep it running, said Cheryl from the doorway. She hadn't left yet. I hadn't moved much through all of it. I just stood there, watching. My hands gripped my apron, like it still meant something, even though it didn't belong to me anymore. Sergeant Cole turned to me. We don't speak up for just anyone, he said. But today wasn't about charity. It was about respect. What you did wasn't small. I didn't do it for a reaction, I said quietly. He just looked hungry. Exactly, the Marine with the scar said. And you gave him more than food. Omar walked up to me, a little awkward. I don't really say this stuff, but thanks. I was having a bad day, and then you reminded me people still care. I managed a small smile. Thanks, Omar. Then Lily approached, biting her lip. I'm sorry I didn't say anything when he fired you. I should have. You didn't owe me that, I replied. But thank you for saying it now. Outside, more people had gathered, some curious, some concerned. A few already had their phones out. Whatever had happened inside wasn't going to stay inside. A local reporter from the Eugene Ledger walked in and asked softly, Do you mind if I ask what happened here? Clayton groaned audibly. Are you serious? Reggie leaned back in his chair, arms folded. Oh, it's serious now. But the real shift didn't happen inside the cafe. It happened hours later, when the story hit the internet and strangers started weighing in from thousands of miles away. By late afternoon, the phones at Riverside Café wouldn't stop ringing. But they weren't reservation calls. They weren't takeout orders. They were strangers from out of town, some angry, some disgusted, some just curious. The video Cheryl had taken of the Marines confronting Clayton, of me walking back in with my dignity intact, had already made it to local Facebook groups, then Twitter, then a few veteran forums. Within 5 hours, it was viral. The comments came in waves. That manager should be ashamed. She did more in one moment than most people do in a lifetime. Someone please give this woman a better job. She deserves more than that dump. My grandfather was a Marine. I'd eat anywhere that lady worked. I didn't even know the video existed until Lily texted me a link that evening. I watched it in silence from my small apartment off West 7th. My living room barely fit the couch, but I sat on the edge of it, phone in hand, mouth pressed shut. I watched myself walk out of that cafe, then walk back in, then speak up. I'm here because I'm tired of acting like kindness needs permission. I heard my own voice play back and didn't recognize it. Not in a bad way, just different. Stronger than I thought I'd sounded in the moment. I set the phone down. Not long after, my inbox started filling up. A handful of reporters wanted to talk. Some guy from a local podcast. Someone from a veterans nonprofit in Salem. But it was one email that really stood out. Subject: Job opportunity. Stand with us. From Jordan Malik, Operations Director, Hagerty Veterans Outreach Center. I hesitated before clicking. The name Hagerty gave me pause. It had to be connected to Walter, the veteran I'd served. And it was. Miss Melrose, my name is Jordan Malik. I oversee the day-to-day operations at the Hagerty Veterans Outreach Center here in Eugene. Walter is a dear friend of our founder and one of the reasons this center exists. He told us about what you did. Then we saw it for ourselves. We are currently expanding our front-end staff and looking for someone with warmth, grace, and good judgment. We'd be honored to have you join us. Full-time, benefits, better hours. You've already shown us who you are. Let us show you the kind of place that values that. I read it 3 times. I didn't know if I wanted to cry or laugh. I couldn't remember the last time someone had called me graceful. I called the number listed at the bottom. Jordan picked up right away. Miss Melrose. Yes, this is Tasha. I hope the offer didn't catch you off guard. It did, honestly. In a good way. Well, we've had your name floating around here all day. Walter hasn't stopped talking about you. I didn't even know his name until now, I said quietly. He remembers everything Jordan said, just not always in the right order. But he said one thing clearly. She saw me. That's more than most do. They talked for 20 minutes. Jordan didn't push. He explained the job duties, some front desk work, helping clients find services, organizing meal drop-offs, and listening. Just being there. Showing up. That, he said, is what we call service. I said yes before the call ended. The next morning, I got dressed like it was my first day of school. I took the bus again. Same stop, same weather, but it felt like a different life. The Hagerty Center wasn't fancy, but it was warm. Real people, real purpose. On the wall near the entrance, someone had already printed out a still frame from the video of me standing in Riverside Café, Marines behind me. Below it, a quote in black marker, "You don't punish people for being decent." Walter was there that day, too, sitting in his favorite chair by the front, blanket over his knees, staring out the window like he was waiting for something. "You need anything before I lock up?" I asked, walking over to him. He shook his head. Just thinking. About what? Back then, when I was in country. You didn't get far if you didn't trust the people around you. Didn't matter what color they were, what they believed. Just mattered if they had your back. I leaned against the wall beside him. I don't know if I did anything special, I said. It was just a meal. He turned to me. That's what makes it special. He didn't respond right away. I used to wonder if I'd ever matter, I said. I worked hard, tried to be decent, but it always felt like I was one small step away from being disposable. Walter looked me dead in the eye. People like you keep things standing. Quietly, without noise, without applause. That manager, he thought power meant being in charge. But real power, real respect, comes from what people say about you when you're not in the room. I smiled. You sure you're not supposed to be writing books or something? He laughed. Nah, I just lived long enough to recognize decency when I see it. There was a quiet moment, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. Then I asked, did you really call those Marines after I left? Walter shook his head slowly. I didn't have to. One of them checks in on me every Sunday. I just told him what happened. Told him a good woman lost her job for being kind. I blinked. And that was enough to bring all 4 of them down there? He gave a dry chuckle. You don't know what you stirred up, girl. When you're good to one of us, you're good to all of us. I didn't know what to say to that. Later, as I walked to the bus stop, the envelope from Eileen March still sat untouched in my bag. I thought about the past few days. The cold rain, the moment I stood over Walter's booth and decided I wasn't going to wait for permission to be kind, and then the fallout. The Marine boots on tile floors, the crowd turning quiet, my own voice rising to say something that wasn't rehearsed, just real. I remembered how it felt to be seen. Not praised, not pitted, just seen. That's what stuck. At home, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a cashier's check for $5,000. Thank you for showing the rest of us what integrity looks like. I hope this helps you build something better. Eileen. I set it down carefully, unsure whether to cry or not. Not because of the money, but because for once, doing the right thing didn't end in silence. I picked up my phone and opened the video again, not to watch myself, but to read the comments beneath. She's the reason I believe in people again. There's hope, and her name is Tasha Melrose. What if we were all just a little more like her? That one got to me, because it wasn't about heroism. It wasn't about standing on a table and shouting. It was just about not turning away when someone needed something. That was all. And it was enough. Life isn't made of grand gestures. It's made of small choices, stacked like bricks. The choice to listen, to speak up, to help, to give, even when no one's watching. And sometimes, those choices change more than just the moment. They change the people watching. The ones too tired, too afraid, or too used to looking the other way. I never asked for recognition. I asked for humanity. And in the end, that's what I got. If this story moved you, share it. Remind someone that kindness still matters. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that shine a light on everyday courage. Because sometimes, it only takes one person to remind us who we're supposed to be.